All right, folks, welcome back to Sub2 Investor. My name is Hans, and in this episode, I will be breaking down my sixth Subject to deal that I ever closed and showing you why VA loans are amazing for Subject to. Stay tuned to find out how we are cash flowing over $500 on this no equity deal. Stay tuned. This is part of my real Subject to deal breakdown series, a series in which I'm going through deals that I've actually closed, going into detail as to how I got the deals under contract, analyzed the deal, structured the deal, disposed the deal, all that good stuff, so that you, the newer investor, or perhaps newer to creative financing investor, can see the ins and outs of what goes into this real estate investing approach called creative finance. Now, this deal, as I mentioned in the intro, cash flows us over $500 a month. It had no equity. We did no work to the property, and we did this deal quasi-remotely at a distance. So there's a lot to learn from this case example as to how you can make Subject to deals profitable instead of wholesaling them to somebody like myself, who will then make them 10x more profitable than you'll make on a wholesale fee. Now, this particular deal came from an expired listing. If you hadn't seen my previous episode where I talk about why the expired MLS list is so great for Subject to, then you can go check out that video as to, how I go about marketing for expired listings for Subject to in particular. This deal came from our expired MLS list, and it was a VA loan. The owner of the property had a VA loan on it. He had put 0% down and had refinanced all of his equity out and then listed the house on the market, and it failed to sell because it had no equity and he couldn't pay realtor commissions, closing concessions, and all that good stuff. So that's where I was able to come in after we sent our postcard to him. He responded back via phone call. I called him. I said, there's no way that I can pay what you're asking for this property, but if you're open to me taking over the payments on it, then I could purchase it from you for your full asking price, as long as you are okay with that loan staying in your name, us making the payments on it into the indefinite future, at which point maybe we will sell it and pay off that loan, or we'll just take it to term. Are you okay with that? The owner was okay with that. So let me just talk about for a moment why these VA loans are so amazing for Subject to opportunities. I already mentioned it. Number one is that the borrower can put 0% down on a VA loan, which means low equity from the get-go, right? If you're not putting any money down, you're buying a house, you're getting it 100% financed, and then something happens in your life where you need to sell that property within the year or 2 years or maybe even 3 years, chances are you haven't built enough equity yet to be able to sell that house on the market without cutting a check to the title company to get it sold. So that's number one reason why VA loans can be so fruitful and might even be worth your time and effort marketing directly to a low equity VA loan list, which you can definitely do using certain softwares out there. But number two is that you can refinance all of your equity out of these properties with a VA loan. So that's exactly what happened with this particular homeowner. He had refinanced 100% of his equity. Basically, whatever the appraiser said, here's the appraised value of the house, right? And sometimes these appraisers can come in high. So you might be able to actually, as the borrower, refinance out even more money than the house is actually worth if the appraisal comes in high. Then you're actually negative equity if the house couldn't even sell at that appraised value. I believe this seller had refinanced multiple times throughout the years because this house was in an appreciating area, and so the value of the property went up and up each year, which meant that as long as he could get an appraisal for higher than it was the year prior, then he could actually be pulling money out of the deal, out of his primary residence, basically indefinitely. So these can be very fruitful because for Subject to, again, if you refi 100% of your equity out of the property and then something happens where you need to sell and you don't have a check to write to the title company to get the deal closed, then you're not going to be able to sell your house. So that's actually exactly what happened in this particular deal. Reason three why VA loans are fruitful for subject to is that you can actually market to VA loans near military bases where there's going to be a higher percentage of VA loans floating around out there. And these folks are constantly getting transferred to and from these stations and bases. The likelihoods of you landing a subject to deal is quite high in a market like that. Number 4 reason why VA loans are great is that they are actually an assumable type of loan, whereas most loans are not assumable. Most of us aren't going to qualify to assume them because we're not veterans ourselves, but if you are, then there's a chance that you could actually assume, like do a technical assumption of the loan, which means you need to be underwritten by the lender. So most of us aren't going to be assuming the loans technically, but the language of taking over the payment is going to be a lot less foreign to somebody with a VA loan if they're aware of that possibility of loan assumption. So that can actually be kind of a bridge in your conversation with the seller to get to the topic of subject to. Now, like I said, this was a deal that was kind of remote for us. I think about 2.5 hours away from where we typically buy. I initially had a phone conversation with the seller to just feel him out. I always search for motivation, condition of the property, timeline to sell, price, what they're looking for, and then I always add in a fifth, encumbrances, what kind of liens or loans are on the property. So just in the course of me talking initially with the seller, I could determine that he was quite motivated to sell because he had moved out of the house into another house and he had a mortgage payment on that house. So now he had 2 mortgage payments. So timeline-wise, he wanted to get this thing sold yesterday. In fact, he had listed on the market and it failed to sell. Number 3, I was able to tell that the condition of the house, and this was one thing I want to talk about, and I want to show you pictures of the house in just a second here, was a grandma's house, or in this case, like a grandpa's house, but like classic grandma's house. And to me, that's like the perfect kind of house to buy, except for pretty houses. I guess I'd prefer a pretty house, but a grandma's house, a clean, tidy, cosmetically outdated, but very structurally sound kind of house is a perfect kind of property to go after for subject to deals. And then I was able to determine basically the price was a natural consequence of him having 0 equity. So he needed the amount of his loan balance, which I think was around $210,000. So I was going to offer to take over that debt of $210 and put a purchase contract together for the price of $210, all subject to the existing liens on the property. And then that dovetails into the 5th topic. I was able to get all of that information in a phone call, which warranted me taking a drive down there. Now, before I did that, I basically said, unless you're willing to sign a contract with me today, I just don't have the time in my busy schedule to drive 2.5 hours. But the individual was more elderly. There was no way a DocuSign thing was going to work. So I had to drive down there. I guess I could have gotten somebody, a bird dog or whomever, to go scope it out for me, but I was kind of curious about this market anyway, so I wanted to go down there. I met the seller at the property. I walked it. I could determine right away that this would be a viable deal, and so we talked about the terms of taking over his mortgage payments. The loan would stay in his name until down the road, either we take it to full maturity and it gets paid off, or we sell it, but I never make a promise as to timeline of when we will sell the house and pay off the underlying debt. And that's very important. You're kind of in a business relationship with these sub-to sellers, and you want to think about it that way. If you are anything but 100% transparent and truthful, brutally honest, like actually try to be so honest that they don't want to do the deal. Because if you give that full disclosure out there where you're like, hey, I'm even hesitant to do this, it's low equity, I'm taking on some risk here, this is kind of the only option that I have for you, and I don't know if you want to do this deal, it's not an ideal situation for you either. You have to leave the loan in your name. You just don't know when this thing is going to get paid off. Could be 30 years from now. If the seller still green lights you, then you got a deal. You're dealing with a motivated seller. And so that's typically how I approach sub-to sellers, honestly. So anyways, we went over to his other house and I sat down at their kitchen table with his wife, really lovely people, and I chatted with them for about an hour or so, and we signed a purchase contract for that property. And so I actually got a contract in person, which is always kind of preferable if you're able to do that. But in today's day and age, a DocuSign often will suffice. And I don't ever try to come across as pushy or pressuring people into doing a subject to. That's something that, if you're a cash buyer, that might work for you. And, you got a big bag of cash sitting right next to you. You're the person in control because you have the money. That person doesn't want to take your offer. Well, then you're going to go buy another house with that big bag of cash, and sorry for them. So you can kind of get away with more of a hardcore sales approach as a cash buyer, in my opinion. I don't claim to be an expert salesperson at all, but with subject to, you want to be the opposite of that. You want to be a reluctant buyer and never pressure anybody into doing a subject to. It's like a cardinal rule of this game, and that's where I think a lot of people get it wrong. But anyways, we got the contract, and part of the contract was the seller was behind in mortgage payments, a significant amount. I think it might have been $15,000 or $20,000. So the only way we were going to make this deal work was that if he could get a loan modification, and this was the days of COVID, and during which it was very easy to apply for mortgage assistance and obtain that, well, then he was going to apply for a loan assistance through his lender and get that approved. And then once we had that taken care of so that his late payments could either be wrapped into a whole new loan or tacked on as a second loan at the back end, then we wouldn't have to come to the table to catch his mortgage up, and then we could actually be cash positive and have very little risk buying this low equity property. One thing I'm always pretty hesitant to dump a lot of cash into a low equity deal unless I know that I'm going to be able to move and either rent or sell that property very, very quickly and collect the option fee or the down payment money that I need to cover those costs. So anyways, he agreed. And so I'm going to show you what the loan modification document paperwork, at least some of it, looked like so that you can kind of see what happened here with the lender. It's pretty cool. And actually before I do that, I just kind of want to show you the picture so that you can get a sense of what kind of property this was. And so you can be a little educated on what kind of properties you can buy using subject to method if you don't already know. All right, so we'll just kind of walk through these. You can see from the outside, it was a nice ranch brick property. This city was appreciating and had a growing population, and so I was excited about getting into this market. Exterior of the house was in pretty good shape. Backside of the house, really need a little pressure washing and a little touch up on the siding there, but here you can see what I mean about it being a grandma's house, right? Those wood floors are in good condition, but the color and the paneling in that room and that light fixture would all need to be updated on a retail flip. And you can see that kitchen. Actually, what ended up happening was that the tenant buyers tore down that wall, this green wall right here, to open it up into the living room right next to it, and pretty sure they were working on the kitchen to open that up too. All right, here's a look into the kitchen. Obviously an outdated kitchen, those laminate countertops and the dark oak cabinets. Basically need to gut this kitchen and replace the cabinets, skim coat that ceiling and get rid of that gross texture, replace the light fixture, probably re-floor too with some luxury vinyl plank. This house had baseboard heating, which wasn't really a problem, but somebody might scoff at that, I suppose. It did have central air conditioning. Nice living room here with large windows, but these windows were aluminum and needed to be updated. Nice master bathroom, definitely outdated with the wallpaper at the top. Needs to be retiled, painted, vanity replaced. Basically the whole bathroom needs the works. Nice bedroom. We can focus on the things that need to be done on a retail flip. I like to do that just to give you the juxtaposition to what you can do when you either sell on a lease and option or on a contract for deed. I love how clean this house is. Clearly it's a livable house. There's nothing that needs to be done in order for somebody to move in. I don't have to do any haul out, any cleaning, any cosmetic updating. Definitely the wood floors could be refinished, but they don't need to be. Had a nice large basement, carpet needed to be replaced, and there was a little bit of water at one point. I don't think it was terribly bad, but tons of potential in this house. But this gives you an idea. There was a full bath in the basement that needed to be finished, which was super nice. Newer hot water heater, air conditioning unit in the attic, nice double garage, and updated electrical panel. So the takeaways of looking at those photos is, man, grandma's houses are amazing for subject to deals. You can place somebody in the house immediately. There's enough work for them to put some skin in the game with, rehabbing the property so that they're more likely to make those payments every single month. Yet there's nothing that you have to do to get the house operational and somebody living there. So again, this was a fantastic property in a good area. I like that it was at least 3 bedrooms. I think it might have had a 4th bedroom and more than 1 bath. So typically, if you're going to be selling these on a lease and option or contract for deed, the 3 2s or more, 3 bedrooms or more, 2 baths or more, are going to be the properties that usually you're able to move them the quickest. So let me now get to the loan modification document so you can see exactly what happened there, and that was super cool. All right, so you can see here, dear borrowers, enclosed, please find 2 copies, original copies of a loan modification and VA refund loan modification document package, and 1 copy for your records. I'm not going to read through this entire document. Basically, this is a loan modification document here, and what I want to draw your attention to is that this was actually a loan modification. They created a whole nother loan, but then they also did a partial claim as well. So that means they created a whole nother loan so that our payment lowered, and you can see that the payment they put right here was $769. It was coming down from somewhere closer to $900, but then they took the late payments and then some from his principal balance. I'm not sure how they did it, but they took $30,000. If you see down here, they took $30,000, actually $32,000, and they put it on the back end of the loan as a partial claim. So this is non-interest bearing principal, which is a second mortgage or second deed of trust. And I'll show you what that document looks like here in a second. So his prior principal balance was $202, but then after the loan modification, his principal balance was $176 on his primary loan, or like the first deed of trust. The second loan was for $32,000, and so added up, that'd be about $208,000 total in terms of total debt that he owes on the house. But only the $176,000 amount is interest bearing, and so that made the monthly payment lower, because you can see he was delinquent in interest by $4,401. Lender had actually advanced funds in order to pay escrow fees, which is taxes and insurance primarily. And so he was behind, actually I stand corrected, he was behind only about $6,500, let's just call it $7,000 on his mortgage payment. But what's so stinking cool about VA loans is that they were willing to take even more money from his principal balance and create this second lien, this partial claim, which is non-interest bearing, and that's what allowed his payments to get lowered. Very cool. I know it's a little bit confusing. He was only behind $7,000, but the partial claim was for $32,000, which means they took $25,000 off of this 202 principal, which he started out with, and put it on the back end as a partial claim that doesn't bear interest. So then he would only have interest on the 167. So that's about as clear as mud. Let me show the partial claim document real quick. All right, so here is the partial claim document. Guys, all a partial claim is it's a subordinate deed of trust. It's a second. If you ever go get a second loan on your house, this is not technically like a HELOC, but it's, I guess, analogous to a home equity line of credit. You're going to have a subordinate mortgage or a subordinate deed of trust. Some states are mortgage states, some states are deed of trust states, so it's the same thing essentially. But this partial claim is called a subordinate deed o trust. So this security instrument is given to the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, blah, 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 blah. Here's the important part, $32,229.17. That's the partial claim amount. It gets filed just like the mortgage does, just like the first deed of trust does. And this is the security of the partial claim for the lender. So whenever this house gets sold or refinanced, then this will come up on title and will have to get paid off. So I don't know if that's super clear to you guys, but basically know this, okay? When you are marketing for subject to deals, you are going to come across many situations where sellers got behind on mortgage payments during the age of COVID. Okay. And It was super easy to get a loan modification or mortgage assistance during COVID times. And so you can't just trust what PropStream says or what Privy says or Batch Leads. You have to dig a little bit deeper, make sure that they don't have a second mortgage that you're going to be taken subject to, because that can totally throw off the numbers on a deal if you don't know that. And some sellers aren't going to be forthcoming with you about that immediately. So you might have to dig a little bit into that. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what's possible with VA loans and the type of grandma or grandpa's houses that are fantastic opportunities for subject to. Now, what's crazy about this deal is when we went to go close it, something catastrophic happened with our paperwork, which made me not afraid the due on sale clause like ever again. It was a catastrophic due on sales clause, atomic bomb that went off, at least in my mind. We didn't get the due on sales clause called on us, but we probably should have. And I'm going to go into this entire story in the next episode to kind of give you an insight into a little bit of, the fear mongering that goes around the due on sale clause. Just stay tuned for more on that story in the next episode. And then I'd love to get into the numbers on this thing so that you can see what we did with it. We did a lease an option with this one, and I want to explain to you as well why we did that and how it works with another deal analysis in the coming episodes. So if you found this content helpful or useful in any way, perhaps inspirational for you to go out there and start doing deals subject to and with creative finance, then please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what questions you have about this deal or what questions this video sparked in your mind, because there's all sorts of things that happen with these deals that fall through the cracks and which I can't really remember all the details of them, but you'll be able to help me remember if you just prompt me with a question. So thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay creative. Peace.